actually a recorded video intended for my students who are enrolled in Spanish subject. In this video, I will be discussing to you the difference between Chavacano and Spanish. I intentionally included this topic because many of my students are Chavacano speakers. And so I'd like them to understand first the difference between the Chavacano and Spanish so that they will be able to distinguish these grammatical differences in order for them to really understand better these two languages and appreciate the distinct features of these two languages. My name, by the way, is Jeffrey Lloyd L. De Castro, and I am a college instructor. Now we proceed to discussing the difference between Chavacano and Spanish. First, we will be discussing the relationship between Spanish and Chavacano. So we all know that Spanish is a Romance language and is part of the Indo-European language family. Its old form is believed to be the Latin language. It originated from the Iberian Peninsula of Europe. That's actually near the Portugal and Spain. It is widely spoken in so many countries in America as continent and in Spain. Chavacano is a Spanish-based Creole spoken in the Philippines, but mostly in Zamboanga City and also Basilan. Although there are also speakers in Cavite, in Ternate, and some other parts in Cavite. I just don't know exactly where in Cavite. By the way, Chavacano has survived more than 300 years ago. It actually started as a pidgin and eventually developed as a Creole language during the Spanish colonization. And a large number of the Chavacano vocabulary are derived from the Spanish language, of course. Although there are a few, I mean, there are also several vocabulary items that originated from or that are derived from the local languages or what we call adstraits. So in this case, we call the Spanish as the superstrate language, which actually contributed a large number of vocabulary to Chavacano, and we call the local languages such as Tagalog, Iligaynon, Cebuano or Bisaya, also we call them as adstraits. And Chavacano is actually, I mean, the grammar of Chavacano is actually influenced by these adstraits or what we call the local languages. So now we proceed to learning the difference or differences no between Spanish and Chavacano as regards the vocabulary items. I will be sharing only a few in order for you to understand some of these differences. So here are some of the vocabulary items that are distinct from each other. So in Spanish, um, the word desayuno is called almuerzo in Chavacano. Desayuno in Spanish means breakfast. Almuerzo also in Chavacano means breakfast. Although almuerzo originated from Spanish, its meaning has been changed already or has undergone semantic change or what we call semantic alteration or change in meaning. Almuerzo in Spanish means lunch. That is the reason why in Chavacano, we do not have a term for lunch because the term for lunch, which is almuerzo, is already used for breakfast. In Chavacano, we just say mediodía for the term lunch. So we say Ya comía yo mediodía. I ate already lunch or I take already my lunch. In Spanish, almuerzo means lunch, while desayuno means breakfast. For B, okay, BEE, in Spanish it is called as abeja, but in Chabacano, we use actually the term used by several Philippine languages, which is bubuyog. The word chicken is called pollo in Spanish, but we call it manok in Chabacano. Although there are older generation who still use pollo to refer to chicken, but mostly most of the Chavacano speakers um, use the term manok instead of pollo. And in fact, not many or majority, if you would ask average Chavacano speakers, they do not know what pollo mean or me I mean means. No. Next is water deeper. Okay, water deeper. In Spanish, it is called as caso, but in Chavacano, it is called as tabo. So tabo is actually a local term that is being used by many Philippine languages. And last but definitely not the least, for money, in Spanish it is called as dinero, while in Chabacano we call it as sen. Okay? So in Spanish, they say no tengo dinero, which means I do not have money, but in Chabacano we say it as no hay sen. No hay sen. Although some Chabacano speakers would understand if you would say or use the term dinero. Then again, generally we use the term sen to refer to money. Now we proceed to the orthography in relation to phonology, and let's see the difference between the Spanish and Chavacano. First is the letter K is used in Chavacano, not in Spanish, for words with K sound. Okay, for example, we have carne. In Chavacano, we use the letter K, although in some cases, and yeah, in some cases, some Chavacano speakers also use C for letter K. While in Spanish, letter C is generally used for K sound. Okay, so do not be confused again. In Chavacano, we can both use letter K and letter C, okay, to um, represent the K sound in the spelling system. Letter H is not always silent in Chavacano. It is always silent in Spanish. For example, the word um, uh, hospital. Okay, so hospital, for example, in Chavacano, when we pronounce the hospital, we actually include the H sound, hospital. Unlike in Spanish, it is not. Letter J that represents the H sound is replaced with H in Chavacano. So, for example, the Spanish word jabon, which is spelled with letter J, is being spelled using letter H in Chavacano. Although I'm not saying that letter J is not also being used. Letter J is also being used in Chavacano. What I mean here is that both letter J and letter H are used for H sound. Letter S is an alternative sound for words with Z sound or Z spelling. For example, the uh, the Spanish word zapatos, which is spelled with letter Z, is being spelled using letter S in Chabacano, zapatos. This is also the same with the zapatos used in Tagalog language. it is spelled using letter S. Spanish diphthongs are replaced by letter Y. So in Chavacano, we many Chavacano speakers would spell it as aire, um, replacing I with Y. Unlike in Spanish, it is spelled as AI for aire. Although in some cases also again, Chavacano speakers spell it using I. What I mean here is that letter Y and I are, I mean, can be used or can be interchangeably used. Now we proceed to morphology. Morphology, by the way, refers to the structure of the word or the word formation process. Spanish is a highly synthetic language. When you say synthetic language, it means that the language is very rich in morphology. It is very rich in morphemes. Okay. Morphology. Chavacano is a highly analytic language, which means that it is not, of course, rich in morphology. Rather, in this kind of language, um, markings are mostly used instead of, for example, inflections, derivation, morphologies, or morphemes. And then second, Chavacano does not have a gender system for nouns and articles. So for example, in Spanish, um, it is said la puerta, but in Chavacano, it is said as el puerta. Notice that um, Spanish, the word puerta here is marked with, I mean, not marked rather, but letter A here actually denotes um, um, that the noun is feminine in form, and thereby its article should also be feminine in form. We use the article la. So we say in Spanish as la puerta, but in Chabacano, we don't. El fuerta. Letter A here in the word fuerta does not denote, it does not denote that the noun or the fuerta here is feminine in form. Okay. In other words, nouns in the Chavacano language do not have gender equivalent or gender system. They are just um, word. No, these are just words that do not actually denote um, anything about gender. Unlike in Spanish, when you say the word fuerta, it means feminine. Words ending in letter O um, are masculine in form. Say, for example, we say ojo, which means I. So that means that ojo is a masculine um, noun. Other markings for feminine include Z, um, ION, and AD, meaning that words ending with AD, words ending with Z, and then words ending with ION, for example, universidad, nariz, and then canción. So this word, universidad, nariz, and canción are actually feminine form because their ending letter or letters include AD for universidad, and then we have nariz, letter Z, and then canción, ION. So uh, this marking system actually, letter A, letter Z, letter AD, letters AD, and letters ION denote um, feminine gender in Spanish, unlike in Chavacano, it's and they are not. And then we use the article L in Chavacano um, consistently to all nouns. Unlike in Spanish, the article is dependent. I mean, the article form is dependent on the noun it determines. For example, we say la puerta, el ojo, la canción, la nariz, la universidad, although there are exceptions to this rule. Okay, for example, the word sistema in Spanish is considered to be masculine, and it is said as el fuerza rather than, and I mean el sistema rather than la sistema. Chavacano has no inflections that denote grammatical number, unlike Spanish. So we say, for example, in Chavacano, mi maga or mi mga amigo, which means my friends. In Spanish, this um, statement is said as mis amigos. So you see that the noun amigo here is actually inflected in Spanish. Letter S denotes plurality. Unlike in Chavacano, we don't have inflectional morphology for grammatical number. Instead, we use the marking system or the marker mga to denote plurality. So basically here we can say that the inflectional morphology of Spanish is similar with English. In English, we add S or ES to pluralize the nouns. In Spanish, the suffix S is also added to pluralize the nouns. Okay, so that's it. And you would also notice that when the noun is plural in form, in Spanish, when the noun is plural in form, that means with S, the article or the article or the possessive pronoun here is also inflected, meaning it is also plural in form. Unlike in Chabacano, the possessive pronoun is not. So we say mi maga amigo, but in Spanish it is said as mis amigos. So that's the difference in morphology. Another difference is that Chavacano verbs cannot be conjugated, contrary to what other Chavacano proponents claim. So here we can say that the base form of the verb remains the same even when there is a subject, regardless of the tense or aspect. So we say in Chabacano, "Takomeo pan," which means I eat bread. In Spanish, it is said as "como pan," "como pan." So notice the verb in Chabacano. We we notice the structure of the verb in Chavacano system, in Chavacano language remains the same, unlike in Spanish. So the verb in Chavacano here is, in this sentence is come. So even if it's in the past, or in the perfective aspect, even in the contemplative or future aspect, the verb remains the same. So even if I use the perfective aspect, ya comeo pan, I ate bread, or the contemplative or future aspect, comeo pan mañana, which means I will eat bread tomorrow. So you notice that the verb remains the same in form, but in Spanish, it's not. So the base form of the verb here is comer, but when there's already a subject, its structure changes. So the verb and the subject conjugate, meaning they are joined together and form another um, word, another structure, another word formation process. So it is said from the verb comer, it it undergoes a word formation process and turned into como pan. So the verb comer in this statement turns to como. So the letter O in this verb actually denotes that the subject is yo. So in Spanish, you can also say yo como pan, or you can drop the subject como pan because the word como or the letter O in the verb um, como signifies that the subject is already O, yo. If the subject, for example, is él or ella, which means he or she, then the verb also changes its structure. So yo como pan, it will become to come pan. Okay, él or ella come pan, and then we say nosotros comemos pan. We eat bread. So notice the changes in the verb construction. So we say yo como pan, él come pan, nosotros comemos pan, vosotros coméis pan, ellos comen pan, which means they eat bread. So this is one of the, again, differences that we have, no, or the between Spanish and Chavacano. Another is that adjectives in Spanish can be inflected. Okay, so in Chavacano we say el magamanga dulce, which means I mean el magamanga dulce, which means that the mangoes are sweet. In Spanish, it is said as las mangas son dulces. Notice that the adjective dulce in Spanish construction is inflected, meaning that it has a suffix s. So in Chabacano, we just say dulce, but in Spanish, it is said as dulces. If, of course, the noun that it modifies is plural in form. So notice that if the noun in Spanish is plural in form, the article, as what I had said earlier, is also plural in form. And also the adjective is plural in form. So we can see a parallel construction in this case, in this case, no, as for the adjective dulce in Spanish. So again, it is said as las mangas son dulces, which means the mangoes are sweet. So unlike in English, you notice that adjectives in English are not inflected. So we just say sweet, and we don't put anything to denote plurality. Unlike in Spanish, um, if the noun is plural in form, then the adjective and the article should also be plural in form, meaning that it's inflected with the morpheme s. Another difference between the Spanish and Chabacano is what we call syntax. Syntax is actually the um, sentence formation, meaning it's the arrangement of the words in the sentence. So Chavacano generally follows the verb subject object, or otherwise known as the VSO construction, while Spanish follows the subject verb object or SVO construction. So for example, Chavacano sentence, ya anda kami na Changi ayer. Notice that the sentence starts with a verb followed by the subject and object. Again, notice that the sentence in Chavacano starts with the verb ianda and then the subject kami and the object nachange ayer. In Spanish, it's totally different. Okay, so the Spanish follows the subject verb object or SVO construction. So the sentence "Y kami na Changi ayer" is said as "Andamos al mercado ayer" in Spanish. So notice that andamos here again is conjugated. If we include the subject here, it is stated as nosotros andamos. So you see the subject comes first, and then the verb. Nosotros andamos al mercado ayer. But since the verb here is already conjugated, we can drop the subject because andamos is already understood that again, the subject is already nosotros because of the conjugation process in Spanish. Andamos al mercado ayer. So that's subject, verb, object. Another difference between the Spanish and Chavacano is that the adjective. Spanish adjectives are generally placed after the noun they modify, while Chavacano adjectives can be placed before or after the noun they modify. For example, in Chavacano, we say el pantalón negro. We can also say el negro pantalón. Both are grammatically acceptable and correct. In Spanish, it is the statement is stated as el pantalón negro. And that ends my presentation. I hope you have learned something from what I shared to you as regards the difference between, or I mean differences between the Chavacano and Spanish. There are still many differences which I can share to you maybe in my next video. So in the meantime, only those differences are presented in this video. So I hope again you have learned something. Should you have any question or clarification, you may feel free to comment in this video in the comment section.